A busy calendar is not a proxy for success or achievement or efficiency or effectiveness. So just because you have a lot of things on your calendar or your folks have a lot of things on their calendar, that doesn't mean they're actually getting anything done. A meeting is not important unless it results in a decision or an action. Meetings to share information should be emails, not sitting around talking. So the more of the time of your folks, wherever they are working from, that they can focus on actually getting things that are important to the organization done, then the better off you are. And so people ask me for advice that are struggling. If they lead a business or a group and they're struggling, the first thing I say is, all right, cut out half your meetings, period. Cut out half of the calls right away. Give people time to actually do what they're supposed to do. Then from a motivation point of view, you have to understand that you are incapable over the long term of motivating your people.
Really excited for today's show. Today's show, we've got Jeff Haden. Jeff Haden is an author of the New York Times bestseller, The Motivation Myth: How High Achievers Really Set Themselves Up to Win. He's a LinkedIn influencer. He's written for Inc. magazine for years, and he's the contributing editor. If you haven't heard of Jeff Haden, I don't know where you've been. He's such a prominent force in both the leadership and workplace space. So I was really thrilled to have him on the show this week. Now, as you're listening to the show, as we're going to be talking about motivation, I want you to dial into two big areas. So first, I want you to hear all the ways we screw up motivation, all the myths we have about motivation, how we kind of either attribute it to the wrong people or things, or just kind of trip ourselves up when we're doing that. Second, I want you to listen close on the tips that Jeff gives on how to not only keep yourself motivated, but also motivate others. There's a right and wrong way to do that as well. So listen to the show. I know you're going to enjoy it. And at the very end, I will sum it all up.
The Workplace Therapist Show is sponsored by the Leadership Foundry. Bringing a cutting-edge, real-world approach to leadership development, the Leadership Foundry partners with each client organization to create a custom-tailored experience, virtual or in person, that combines innovative leadership content, world-class facilitators, and one-on-one coaching to ensure your leaders have everything they need to grow and thrive. To find out more and to design your one-of-a-kind program, visit myleadershipfoundry.com.
Jeff, really excited to have you on the show today. And of course, our topic, naturally, is going to be motivation. And that's an important topic, I think, not only for us as individuals, and we'll talk more about your book here in a minute, because I mean, there's so many great secrets and nuggets in here on how we can unlock that in ourselves. But man, I keep getting asked the same question from managers and leaders. How do I keep my people motivated in this environment? So I think our conversation today is going to really be around that. Now, for folks that maybe haven't gotten a chance to know you yet, or have heard of you, which how could they have not? But I want to just rattle off a few things. So you're a speaker, author. Of course, you're the author of this New York Times bestseller, The Motivation Myth, which is a fantastic book, by the way. My wife gave you one of the best compliments she can ever give a nonfiction writer. She said, he made me laugh throughout the entire book. Oh. And that is something that most nonfiction books typically bore her. So she was like, this guy's great.
She's now my new best friend.
Yeah, that's right. So in addition to that, of course, if they don't know you from either of these things, I mean, Inc. magazine, I mean, gosh, you've just been such a mainstay there. So that's a huge part of also your identity and the way you're kind of contributing to the world. So before we jump into motivation, I'd love to hear just a little bit about kind of your journey. What ultimately got you kind of in the seat you're in today? Because I know it was not necessarily a direct path.
No, it wasn't direct. I worked in manufacturing when I was in college. I worked my way through college, and so I had a full-time job and went to school and really liked manufacturing. And so when I was graduating and interviewing for jobs, they were all with like 40-year-old men in cubicles, which at the time I thought, please no. Now I would love to be a 40-year-old man, but at the time it was, I don't want to do that. And I liked working on the shop floor. And so a plant had just been opened in the town that I lived, Fortune 500 company. At the time, they were the world's largest commercial printers. And the plant manager where I worked said, you should go there because it's just starting out. It's only got 100 people. It'll probably be 1,000. You can do what you like to do and have opportunities to grow. So I did that, and I was the proverbial college boy, which was kind of irritating, but also turned out to be an advantage for me because I had to prove myself to everyone that I would actually be willing to work hard, get dirty, and do what I needed to do. And I kind of learned that from my grandfather. I used to muck out stalls with him, and he would one of them was horrible and it smelled terrible, and I finally went, "Oh, this is awful." And he said, "Son, that's the smell of job security." And I thought, "Okay, so if you're willing to do what no one else is willing to do, then there is a place for you." So anyway, fast forward, I worked my way up, worked in a whole lot of different jobs, levels, eventually ran a plant that had about 1,000 people. That had been my goal all along. I wanted to do that. Did it for about 2 years and looked around and thought, "Oh, I don't know if I want to do this for another 20. And anyone listening to you that is in a leadership position will understand that, because the job is no longer the doing. The job is the people and the leading and the relationships and all those other things. It didn't feel like I was serving my constituents as well as I should. So I decided that I would try something new, and I decided to write. Had no writing background, no education, no anything else. Threw myself into the deep end, and it kind of worked. Looking back, it was a foolish move because I had a really good job, but it was also the best thing that I could have done, because I got to be a beginner again, and I got to work my way up again, and I got to meet lots of people I never would have met, and had all kinds of experiences that I never would have had. And so, what is it? Joe Walsh of the Eagles, I saw an interview one time where he said that, as you're living your life, it's this huge, confusing mess. But then when you look back, all the dots connect. And I think they really do. You just can't try to connect them looking forward. So that's my story, and I'm going to stick to it.
Already made a rocker reference. I mean, it's rich in the book, by the way.
Eminent philosopher Joe Walsh.
That's right. So I want to pivot over to the book. What got you? Let's start before this thing right here. I'm holding it. It's concrete in my hand. Let's go back in time before this thing has been birthed. What got you down this path? What was your inspiration?
One of the neat things about the position I'm in with Inc. magazine is that I do get to talk to lots and lots of successful people in a wide variety of fields. And so one day I was talking to Venus Williams, which is a fun name to drop if you're going to drop a name. And I asked her about that moment that I was sure she had when she said, "Oh my gosh, I want to be a Grand Slam tennis champion. I want to be the number one player in the world." And that set her off on her path. And she didn't have that. She just wanted to get better at tennis. And that has really been her focus her whole life, is I want to be better tomorrow than I am today. And so I started asking people that I talked to the same basic question. What was that moment for you? Nobody had one. None of the really successful people had that lightning bolt moment that I refer to in the book, where they went, "Oh my gosh, I want to be, I want to run $1 billion company, or I want to be a, world-class musician," or whatever it may be. They didn't have that. They just had an interest, and they said, "I want to get better at this." And that was the process. And so then I compared that to all the people that would email me saying, "Can't find my passion, can't find my purpose. How do I get the motivation to achieve a big goal?" They were all looking for the lightning bolt. So what I kind of came away with is, if you do get a lightning bolt, it doesn't last and it doesn't take you along forever. You have to have some sort of process that allows you to create your own motivation, just enough to get to the next day. So you get up and do it again and do it again. And it becomes this virtuous cycle of effort, a little bit of improvement, which always feels good. That makes you happy. That makes you excited. That makes you want to get up tomorrow and keep working at it. And you create that cycle of success, effort, motivation, and it rolls on from there. So that was really the genesis of it, was stop looking for an external source of motivation and stop looking for that lightning bolt, and just do something you are interested in and try hard to get better at it. Give yourself a little bit of time to get better at it, and the process of improvement will take you to where you want to go. Now, it may be that 2 years into it, you go, "You know what? I thought this was fun, but now I'm not so sure I want to do this anymore." That's okay too, because you don't lose anything that you have put into it along the way. You may not use some of those same skills, but you take the process of knowing how to be a beginner and how to get to a level of expertise to whatever else it is that you choose to do. So none of it's wasted. Yes. And like Bill Walsh would say, you get to look back and connect the dots and go, "Wow, that was a really cool plan," even though I didn't have a plan.
Yeah. So, okay. So something else gosh, there's so many things I want to ask you about. One of the things I'm going to, because it's just on top of mind for me, I wrote down when you were talking about even some of your journey and some of the things you did, and then some of the things you noticed and you wrote about in the book. I wrote down kind of this idea of burning the ships. Like not having being all the way in. What role does that play in motivation?
That's a double-edged sword. There are people that will say, and especially since Inc. is an entrepreneur magazine, there are a lot of people that say, if you're going to start a business, you got to burn the ships. You got to quit your job. You got to go all in. That's the only way you'll have the passion and purpose and drive to carry your way through. If you're of a certain age and have kids and responsibilities and things, that's a risky way to go. So
that's fair.
My take on it is, and what I did when I started writing, I kept my full-time job. I worked really, really hard to make sure that no one in the world would notice I was doing anything on the side. I was as good of an employee as I could possibly be. Then I went home and figured, okay, if I'm going to start this, I've got to do it on my own time. So it was nights, weekends, it was that kind of thing. So you take care of your core, and then you go all in, with air quotes, on whatever your side project is or whatever it is you want to become. And in a way, what you're saying is I'm burning my free time boats, if you want to look at it that way, which is okay, because if what you want to do truly matters to you, then that free time stuff is important as what it is you think you want to become. So in a kind of trite way to put it, if you look at your me time, not as I want to sit on the couch and veg out and watch The Crown or something like that, which is nothing wrong with that. I watched it. But if you look at me time as I'm going to put that into something that I want to become, that's my me time, then now you have a passion and a purpose, and you've burned your veg out boat, but I've got another basket that I might be able to put some eggs in, if I'm allowed to mix my metaphors as I just did.
Yeah, I think it works great. So how do we screw this up? How do we screw up this idea of motivation and forward momentum and becoming the 2.0 version of us? Because I think that's really what you're getting at here. Really, we could also talk about that as saying, become the 2.0 version of you, whatever that is, and whatever you want that to be.
Probably the biggest thing that happens to people is they do get some sort of, maybe it's not a lightning bolt, but it's a little shock that says, I want to be X. And they go, oh my gosh, I'm going to start that. The problem with being a beginner, the good side of being a beginner is that your improvement can be pretty rapid. The bad side of being a beginner is you suck for a while. And so let's use a silly example, but let's say you want to run a marathon and you are starting from scratch. So if you go out and run a mile and you come home and you've struggled your way through that mile and you're on the couch dying, the idea that you're going to do 26 of those, there is no way. And so most people say, wow, I want to run a marathon. And they go out and they run a couple days, and it's so hard that they give up, and they haven't given themselves the time to improve a little bit so they can say, you know what, this is working. I can get there. And so I always say to people, if there's something new you want to try, I call it whatever days you want to put to it, but call it the 2-week rule. Say, okay, I'm going to give myself 2 weeks, and I'm committing to working at this for 2 weeks and actually working at it, not thinking and not dreaming and not playing around, but I'm actually going to work at this for 2 weeks. At the end of that time, you will have improved. You will have gotten better. You'll have seen that this thing does work. And then you can make a clear-eyed decision about, do I want to continue? Do I want to keep going? And usually you will. It's like the old advice about procrastinating. If there's something you want to do, if you just say to yourself, okay, I'm going to do this for 5 minutes, and at the end of 5 minutes, if I don't want to do it, I can stop. Usually once you get started, you're good to go because you've gotten over that little mental hump. And so the 2-week rule works on something difficult that you're embarking upon because it gives you time to improve and see that the process works, which motivates you to keep going. Yeah. And then there's a little side benefit to it too. Now you've improved some, and you hate to give that up.
Yeah.
You hate to see that be wasted, because we all hate sunk cost. So that's another benefit. So that's probably the first way to screw it up, is you don't give yourself enough time to get your cycle of motivation going.
Yeah, it was funny hearing you talk. I joined Orange Theory Fitness back in September to lose my COVID-15. I died 8 times in September.
Yeah.
Jeff, 8 times.
Yeah.
So I don't know how many lives I have left, but we're.
And what's odd is you have lots more.
apparently, 8 times.
Well, that's a funny thing about that. When you try hard at something, I know this is not what we're talking about, but when you try hard at something and you push yourself past what your self-imposed limit was, because we all have self-imposed limits, and they are always far short of what we are actually capable of, both in terms of effort, but also in terms of ability. And so every time you go a little past, it isn't fun, but then you come out the other side and say, you know what, I can do more than I thought I could do. And you've already realized, I'm sure, that, you know, I can do this. And I did sort of die, but I didn't really die. And actually, I can do more. And so you end up ratcheting up your self-imposed limits, which is a really cool thing too.
Yeah. Amen, brother. Amen. Something else you talked about in the book I thought really fascinating. It was a little piece of research. It was the folks that talked about their goal, like they've already achieved it, actually had less. So I don't want to steal your thunder. You know where I'm going. I saw your smirk on your face. So tell me about that finding. I thought that was fascinating.
Actually, it wasn't a smirk. It was a winning smile. But no, I'm kidding. So the idea is, and I'll use the example I used in the book, where I live on the East Coast, and so the Appalachian Trail runs from Georgia to Maine. And every summer, lots of people hike the entire thing. It's 2,000 some miles.
I live at the base of that bad boy. I know exactly what you're talking about.
Yeah, so it's a major accomplishment. And so let's say that you've decided that you want to do that. And you go to a party and you're talking to people and you're saying, yeah, I'm going to hike the trail this year. And here's the gear I'm buying. And here's the trail nickname I'm going to get, because everybody gets a trail nickname. And you're talking about all of this stuff. Research shows that if you talk about it that way, you are much less likely to ever actually embark upon that, because you got some mental stimulation just from picturing yourself being there. So picturing yourself took away from your actual drive to accomplish it, because you kind of already are there in your mind. So the better way to approach that, a lot of people like accountability buddies, or they like peer pressure. They feel that helps them go along. Instead of telling people what your end result is and talking a lot about that, like you want to run a marathon, sitting there talking about crossing the finish line in New York, if that ever gets to happen again, and all the excitement and hoopla, just say, I'm going to run a marathon, and here is what I'm going to do for the next 3-4 weeks. Let's check in every Friday, and you make sure I am following my process. Not, am I still hoping to achieve the goal, but have I done the things that I need to do in order to someday get there? And that's the way you use an accountability buddy, because they make you stick to the process. And process is everything. Goals are great, but process is everything. So that the study you're referencing is, tell people what you want to do, but really briefly. And then if you want them to help you, talk about the process. And if you just feel like talking about how exciting it is to accomplish what you're doing, keep that to yourself.
Yeah, I love that. Yeah, it's beautiful. Beautiful. Okay, so let's then shift a little bit into some tips and nuggets. So I'm going to keep it on the idea of personal motivation, and then we'll kind of land our plane talking about motivating others. So in terms of personal motivation, what are some other things that, without giving away all the wonderful juiciness of this book, what are some other nuggets in here that you would say were learnings for you that were kind of big ahas that help us think about how we can go down that path a little bit better?
If we go back to my 2-week rule and process and effort, I'm really big on finding what I call pros instead of finding a coach.
Yeah.
And the idea of it is basically that there are a lot of people who can coach you, but they tend to be a little more on the motivation side, which is what, the rah-rah, you can do it, let's go kind of people. And what you really need is someone who will give you a clear, cold, hard truth. Here's what you need to do. So if we go back to my marathon example, if you go to your local gym and ask a personal trainer for a program to run a marathon, they're going to ask you questions about, how do you like to run? What time do you like to do it? They're going to conform to what your wants and wishes and ideas are, which is okay. But for most of us, that's not going to make you successful, because your self-imposed limits are going to get in the way. Flip it over and go to the guy down the street that's run 5 marathons and say, hey, I'm starting from scratch. What should I do? He or she is going to give you a brutal looking plan, which you are going to hate, but is almost guaranteed to ensure that you will complete that marathon if you do what's there. So which one do you want? the soft, fuzzy, feel good, I'm going to halfway enjoy this program, but probably won't ever get to where I want to go, or the one that's hard and tough and realistic that will get you to where you want to go. If I'm going to put 6 months into it, give me the thing that will get me to where I want to go. Don't give me the one that is what I want to do. So it's want to do versus need to do. And that to me is a huge part of all of this. And then you can use that person as your accountability buddy if for no other reason than you don't want to let them down, or you don't want to feel silly for having asked for input that you chose not to accept.
Yeah, that's yeah. You also mentioned, and something else that I wanted to kind of touch on, you mentioned the idea of kind of either power of numbers or the aggregate of the 1%. I'd be curious about either of those.
Power of numbers is a lot of things can be broken down just into a certain number of numbers, which is a terrible expression. I'm not sure why I used it, but let's say it's like, for me, I like cycling. And every year I do a couple Grand Fondos that are usually 100 miles, 4 or 5 mountains, 10,000 feet of climbing. It's a lot of work. I have learned over time that if I give myself 4 months and I put 2,500 miles in my legs, if I ride about 2,500 miles in that time, I will be able to do well on the Grand Fondo. So I know I can break it down into numbers and say, okay, I need about 2,500. I'll break that down into 30s, 40s, 20s, whatever. And when I hit that number, I'm good to go. And there are a lot of things, like if you're in sales, if it takes you 10 calls to make 1 sale, okay, if you need 5 sales a month, you need to make about 50. Can you work at improving your return rate? Absolutely. But at least at first, I just have to click this off. And so there are tons of things you do in life that can be based on, I just need to do this a certain number of times and it will get me some of the results that I need. So instead of kind of sitting back and saying, I've got to find the perfect sales pitch before I can ever go sell, say to yourself, all right, I'm making 5 cold calls a day. I'm going to click these things off and I'm going to learn from it. I'm going to get better from it. And that's my process. And it will create some results. So if you can bring things down to numbers and just follow the numbers, it keeps you on the path because you're not constantly searching for something else.
So I'm channeling my 16-year-old at home. He is big into weightlifting now, and he's become obsessed with Arnold Schwarzenegger. Obsessed. Like he has Arnold posters all over his room. And I can't tell you how much he talks about, reps, your reps, which is what you just said. It's like, know the reps you need to ultimately get to your goal.
Arnold even used to say that he was excited to go to the gym because he knew that every repetition of every exercise got him closer to the body that he needed in order to be able to win a bodybuilding contest. So it's the same thing. It's like, if I know this works, I should be excited about doing it because it's going to get me the result that I need.
Yeah. Yeah.
And Arnold is actually one of the more fascinating figures in American life, if you think about it.
Totally. I mean, the guy's so many different lives he's had. They're all famous, world champion kind of lives. He's done it a couple times. So, fascinating guy. Any other just kind of final nuggets before we pivot over to motivating others? So this is some great steps to how we stay the path of keeping us focused.
Probably the last one, you talked about aggregate gains, and that goes back to a British cycling team where they wanted to be able to win the Tour de France, and they got the manager of the team said, instead of trying to find this one area where we're going to be absolutely dominant, we're going to look at everything that goes into making a world-class cyclist and world-class team, and we're going to try to make marginal improvements to each one. And so it was the idea of the aggregate gains of, if I can improve for this 5%, that 5%, this 5%, sooner or later, all those things add up. And so if you apply it to yourself, instead of saying, like your to-do list, people struggle with their to-do list all the time. Instead of trying to revamp the whole thing, just look at it and say, okay, what little thing on here doesn't work for me? How can I improve that one little thing? Yeah. And I'm just going to do that. Or if it's your morning routine or whatever else it may be, just find little tweaks to small slices of whatever that bigger task is, and just try to improve those little things. And over time, you will have made larger improvements. And the cool thing is, if you go in slices, every one of those you improve is success, feels good, makes you motivated, will make you want to improve another one, and it creates your virtuous cycle. As opposed to that really big goal that takes a long time to achieve, you don't get to feel success very often, if ever.
Like in the book when you talked about, and often the recommendation where people who are in debt pay off the smallest loan first, not necessarily the one that's got the biggest interest rate.
Because it feels good.
Because it feels good.
And the process works, and it motivates you to keep going because it was exciting and fun and you succeeded. We all like to do things that we are good at. So if you give yourself a chance to be good at as many things as possible, even really small things, you feel better about yourself, and it motivates you to keep on going.
So I want to pivot us into the workplace now. Okay, we're going to take from an individual now to the workplace. And this is something that I often have people come to me, the listeners or other folks will say, why can't I just do my job? If I just do my job really well, right? I see you. That's a winning world-class smile, not a smirk. Okay. Can I just do my job and then shouldn't I get promoted? I mean, what about this politics stuff? Like, why am I wasting my time with that stuff? Which, you did talk about the importance of likability and some other elements around that. And I don't want to steal your thunder, but in many ways, you almost talked about how that could be a process too, in terms of that. So I'd love to get your thoughts and commentary on how we manage those relationships. Because my experience is whenever you work for a company that's over $3 billion in revenue, you're not actually working for a company anymore. At $3 billion, it morphs from a company to a government. So politics really matter, and relationship building really matters. So there's that and performance are both kind of, part of the game, so to speak.
Yeah, I'm a poster child for that because I spent the first 4 or 5 years of my professional life thinking that I shouldn't have to conform to anything that any other agendas, any other whatever. If I kicked ass, then that should be enough. Why do you care? And I realized finally that, all that stuff does matter. So it's a cliche, you can hate the game, but if you want to win the game, you have to learn how to play the game. Yeah. And so that doesn't mean that you spend all of your time on politics. It doesn't mean you spend all of your time on relationship building. You can actually turn that into a positive thing. So like I have people that will say to me, this whole networking at work and making connections and stuff, I shouldn't have to do that. I should just be able to be, like you said, head down, do my job. But that's not the reality. But what you can do instead of making it a negative is you can make it a positive and say, okay, I do need to have connections with people. So I'm going to make them by being helpful to that person. I'm going to go and I'm going to, instead of schmoozing, I'm going to look for somebody that may be struggling and I'm going to help them. Or I'm going to look for someone who's having a problem in some other area and I'm going to help that person. And that's how I'm going to build my relationships. Then you get to be effective, which is what that person says they want to be able to focus on. But you also get to do it with other people, which expands your base, shows your leadership ability, shows your relationship. It shows all the things that other people want to see from you without you just having to feel like it's a waste of time and you have to play some game. So the thing to do is to twist it around and say, okay, if I need to do these things, how can I do that in a way that is also satisfying to me? And oftentimes you can find them if you just take a second and say, how would I want this to be done with me? And it's an easy thing. So that's my biggest advice for that, is to understand there is a game. You may have to play it, see what the rules are, and then figure out how you can play the game so that it makes you feel good about yourself too. And the helping people thing is always a winner.
Yeah.
If for no other reason, even if it doesn't get you promoted or get you ahead, you at least get to go home every day feeling good about yourself. And that's a win in itself.
Amen, brother. Yeah, that's great. Okay, so for our last question for our conversation today. All right. So now we're talking to the leader who's listening right now, and she or he is struggling with keeping their folks motivated. Because, man, we've just been sitting here doing video calls. By the way, what I'm hearing in the world, you may have been hearing the same thing, was when all this pandemic started, people said, oh, amazing, I don't have to commute. This is great. I got all this found time between like 7:30 and 9 in the morning, and then between 5 and 6:30 at night, or 7 at night, right? And then something clicked with I don't know who, but maybe some big leader said, hey, everybody's free in those windows. We should have meetings now. Right. So now people's meetings start at 7:30 in the morning on Zoom, and they go all the way till 7 or 7:30 at night. And it just feels like Bill Murray and Groundhog Day every single day. So what are some either thoughts you have, guidance you might have on how we can keep others motivated that may be looking to us? Or should we? Or is that not even our responsibility? I mean, it can really go any way you feel like you want to answer that question.
Wow. So cut me off when you're tired of me. First of all, a busy calendar is not a proxy for success or achievement or efficiency or effectiveness. So just because you have a lot of things on your calendar or your folks have a lot of things on their calendar, that doesn't mean they're actually getting anything done. A meeting is not important unless it results in a decision or an action. Meetings to share information should be emails, not sitting around talking. So the more of the time of your folks, wherever they are working from, that they can focus on actually getting things that are important to the organization done, then the better off you are. And so if people ask me for advice that are struggling, if they lead a business or a group and they're struggling, the first thing I say is, all right, cut out half your meetings, period. Cut out half of the calls right away. Give people time to actually do what they're supposed to do. Then from a motivation point of view, you have to understand that you are incapable over the long term of motivating your people. So don't try. The way to motivate them is to create tasks and projects and goals and targets and things that have chunks to them that allow people to feel small wins as frequently as possible. And also, you need to monitor not just the success of a task, but also the fact that a task was completed. Because let's say you're in a business where your sales cycle is maybe a year. I don't know, say you sell railroad engines. You're selling train cars. That doesn't happen overnight. You don't walk into a business and sell 50 engines. It takes a long time. And so a lot of that is process related. So you reward, you praise, you recognize people based on process achievement and process success, which makes them feel good about the fact that, yep, I'm doing the things that I need to do. And slowly over time, if you give them enough things that they can feel good about having achieved, they'll create the motivation in themselves. They'll get the fulfillment themselves. And you can just pop in sometimes with the pat on the back and the praise and the thanks and all that other stuff. And then probably lastly, and I'll go really brief on this, but if you look up Carol Dweck, the Stanford psychologist, and the growth mindset and the fixed mindset, if you focus on praising people, not always based on outcomes, but also based on effort. So even if something doesn't go well, but you praise the effort, people start to see themselves not as she puts it, I'm either smart or not, good at math, not good at math, good at sales, not good at sales. But I am a person who works hard and keeps trying and slowly over time can become better than what I am today. And so you keep people from thinking I am what I am and I can either do it or not. And you make it like, okay, everything is a process and everything is a path and everything's a journey. And so, if I don't know, I work for you and I created a presentation, you can say, wow, this is great. But you can also say, hey, this is really great. And I can tell you worked really hard on that. Thank you. Because you're rewarding the effort side of it, which makes people feel good and it makes them want to work hard because they know that they are working hard. That was a long-winded ramble, but you have to set an environment. In simple terms, or in summary, you have to create an environment where people can feel successful themselves and they can see that they're doing good things and they are feeling like this is rewarding and fulfilling and I am improving. And if you can do that, you don't have to constantly be there trying to do the rah-rah thing, which doesn't work.
Right. I love that. So create a motivational process rather than try to be a motivational person.
Right.
It doesn't mean you can't reward people, but make it part of a process because it's the process that's going to sustain people, not trying to be Tony Robbins.
Yeah, everybody. Yeah.
I had to bring it up. I
have a Tony example in my book.
I know.
And he and I have talked about it, and he's actually good with it. We had a little laugh over it, but I did take a shot at Tony. I like Tony a lot. But the fire walking thing, for people that are listening, I make a little bit of fun of the whole walking on hot coals thing, because I don't think that does anything for you other than prove that you can walk on hot coals.
Yeah.
But anyway.
Well, and sorry. I think, and Tony's side, I think there are people in the world, for whatever reason, I don't particularly subscribe to it myself, but they're looking for motivation in someone else. they're looking for some guru or someone who's going to give them. Maybe they think the lightning bolt's in their pocket. And you're going to give me the lightning bolt, and then I'm going to become motivated. That is absolutely not what you talk about, which is why I so much resonate with your approach. Is something, actually, ironically enough, it really is the thing that we all can unlock for ourselves and for others. But it really is about following a process.
Yeah, I love role models, and I think it's great to look at other people and what they've done. The key is not to try to become that person or to have that person somehow inspire you. The key is to say, hey, they did something that I would like to do. How did they do that?
Yeah.
What actual steps did they take that got them there? And I'm going to borrow that piece. And so if you do that, I mean, why? I say this way too many times, but there's no reason to reinvent a wheel when there are perfectly good wheels sitting all around that you can grab and adopt and use to yourself. I know we're all individuals, but 99% of the time we're about the same. And so if you have something that works really well for you, it will probably work really well for me. And if I give it 2 weeks and I try hard, then I will know enough about how it works for me to make the little tweaks that maybe make it even more effective. But there's no reason for me to try to create my own bespoke processes when there are so many good ones out there that you can borrow.
Amen, brother. That's a great way to start to land the plane. So before we officially land it, anything that we haven't talked about today that we should have, whether it's in terms of motivating yourself, motivating others, motivational myths, anything that you feel like we haven't hit?
Now, I would reinforce, if anybody takes anything away, it would be, don't look for other people to motivate you. Find ways that you can create your own virtuous cycle of effort and results and happiness, and it creates your own little drip. Because if you do that, you get to use that for the rest of your life. Whereas the people that you hope will motivate and inspire you, they naturally come and go, and you will constantly be looking. So, it's a locus of control thing, but you actually do control motivation yourself. Yeah. Don't expect others to give it to you.
Yeah. And start with 2 weeks. 2 weeks, great way to start.
Always 2 weeks. If you're not willing to do something for 2 weeks, then you shouldn't even be trying, because what's the point? And I don't mean that crappy. No. I just mean if you're not willing to give it a 2-week try, then you really don't want to do it. And that's great, because that means you shouldn't waste your time and energy on that. Pick something that you are willing to work at for 2 weeks.
Yeah. And you haven't quite said it, but you've beat around the bush on this. Time's our most precious resource. So you really honor that and use it intentionally and wisely. And it's like even...
Yeah, so to answer your question, that's a great thought. I'm sorry I'm taking you long. But the tip I would like people to take away from it is, time is that precious resource. Be just as intentional about not scheduling, but using your free time as you do your work time. Most people are really, really good at, okay, I'll block out my work day, and then they get done, they're like, and then you're not quite sure what you want to do. I don't mean you have to be productive your personal time, but it should be something that you enjoy or you get fulfillment from, or that advances you in some way. Family time, whatever it is, be just as intentional about that, because that's what you will someday look back and think, wow, I missed out on whatever it may be. You're not going to regret the time you didn't spend at the office, but you are going to regret the time that you didn't spend on things that were important to you.
Okay, you just set up the perfect segue to the question I ask all my guests at the very end.
Oh.
So what's that one life hack on how we can have better conversations or healthier relationships at home or at work?
Wow, I'll pick something that I struggle with, so that's why it's my hack. Patience. I am not as patient as I should be with other people, whatever it may be, whether it's a problem or a conversation. I try to run really quick to the solution instead of listening to what's there. And sometimes the solution is just the fact that you listened. And that's also true for employees. I would have employees come to me, and within like 2 sentences, I knew exactly what I wanted to tell them to go do. But I couldn't do that because you have to listen and you have to hear and you have to understand. And that's all part of the process. And so if I could find a way to be more patient in those situations, it would be, I'm sure the people around me would appreciate it a lot more. So that would be mine. And actually, from a leadership point of view, that's probably one of the qualities that I think most leaders are missing the most. Like, say you take a new employee, you hire somebody, And then you right away expect them to be great. You want their training to be short. You want all that stuff to happen, but you don't, unless, how do I say this? If you are going to hire a person who can do everything that you want them to do in a job, you probably can't afford them. So there is some period of time where they have to learn and grow and develop and become better. And so if you don't give them that time and patience and willingness to let them go that way, then they're going to be demotivated because they are not feeling good about themselves and they're not feeling like this is a pathway to something that's good for them. So patience is
what I love about patience, whether we talk about patience with listening in those one-on-one interactions or patience with people's growth and development, I think we can take all the concepts that we talked about today and apply it to that. Whether you talk about try it for 2 weeks or 1%, aggregate 1%, or numbers, if it takes someone you learn over time in this role, it takes them 6 months until they're up to speed. And so then you use it at the back of your mind so you don't get impatient with them on day 4. So I think a lot of the things you offered could be even used in that way too. So it's great. It's like a Swiss Army knife, Jeff. You just gave us a Swiss Army knife.
Look at you summing up my rambling thoughts. Well done, you.
So if people want to get a copy of this excellent book, follow you, read more of your articles, just, go to where you are, where can they go?
Well, the book is sold wherever fine books are sold. And I write for Inc. magazine. It's Inc. INC. I once interviewed he was a rock star that had 8,000 tattoos, and I got introduced to him, and he said, "Oh, you write for Inc. Where are your tattoos?" And I'm like, "No, not that Inc." But so I write for Inc. magazine, and I'm on LinkedIn, and that's probably the best place to reach me because I don't do a lot of social media other than LinkedIn, and I do respond. Sometimes it takes me a while, but I do respond to people, and I will connect, and so Inc. and LinkedIn, and that's it.
Okay, Jeff. Awesome. Thank you for your wisdom, hard work on this book, and the conversation today. Wasn't that a great show? I'm again thrilled to have Jeff on the show, and I felt like it was so rich. I have a page and a half of notes. So let me summarize a few takeaways that I had for the show. So first, ways we screw this up. I think he made a few very important points. The first one is we set this really big, long horizon goal. We say, I'm going to run a marathon, or I'm going to run a 100-miler, or I'm going to do something really, really, really big. And while that's a good thing, it can be demotivating if we're constantly looking out to that long horizon. So one of the antidotes that Jeff said was do 2 weeks, 2 weeks at a time. Keep it a shorter horizon. It can still be in service of that bigger thing. But as he mentioned, when he talked to all those, and it's in his book, when he talks to all the pros and the people who've achieved a lot, they were really addicted to the process, not about the results. They're not thinking about winning the championship as much as they are thinking about getting better each and every time. Second, he said, make sure that you are not talking to other people about your goal. You should be talking to them about your process. So don't say, oh, I'm going to run this marathon, or I'm going to hike the Appalachian Trail, because then you get a little payoff from them saying, oh my gosh, amazing that you're going to do that. And when you should be saying, this is the process I'm going to follow, because then you're turning them into accountability partners. I thought that was really smart and really wise. A few other steps that he mentioned, he said, you need to look for a pro, not someone who's just going to, give you ways to do this thing that's going to fit your lifestyle, but really find someone who's done it before and follow their process. Steal and borrow their process. Understand the reps you need to get to your goal, and try and measure those. So how many things you have to do, and then how do you get some of those little 1% gains? How can you get the little tweaks on the edges that are going to make you that much better incrementally? So if you can see, he's really bringing it down to the daily things, the small things that ultimately will help us improve over time. Now at work, he had some great tips for us too. He said part of the thing at work is, when we're thinking about performance, it's not all performance. There's going to be a game involved, as workplaces have. So make that a process too. How can you find people that you can help? So, kind of even find ways to measure that. He also said, a busy calendar is not a proxy for achieving stuff. So make sure that you're using your time really wisely. That was another big theme in our conversation, whether it's free time and how we use that wisely, or even our time at work. He suggests cutting out half your meetings. I think that's a brilliant idea. I've only known one organization to do it, and it worked fantastically well for them. They actually asked to add in a few more meetings, but just a few. Most people add more meetings. And then he said, you cannot create a motivation in another person. You have to create a system that motivates people. So find ways to reward efforts, reward behaviors, create systems that will reward people and motivate people. So it's almost like creating your own little gym system where you're measuring people's results along the way and motivating them for their efforts. And then the last thing, I thought this was a great little tactical thing that I'm going to start including into my coaching with my clients is when someone achieves something, don't only recognize just what they achieved, but recognize their results. Say to them, I can tell you worked really hard at this. You're rewarding their effort. You want to reward their effort because effort is what's going to keep people going. So I thought those were so many tips. There's so many more in his book. The Motivation Myth is an amazing book. I would really encourage you to pick up a copy. Hope you enjoyed the show, and I can't wait for our next one.
Thanks so much for listening to the Workplace Therapist Show, and thanks to all of you who've left a review. It really means a lot. This week's review comes from Vicky Tribick, who wrote, "Very insightful and motivating. This is a fantastic program from the caliber of guests to the powerful insights. I've gained so much by listening. The Workplace Therapist consistently adds value to my professional and personal life every week." Thanks so much, Vicky. We really appreciate you writing in.